The key turned with a soft, metallic sigh, and the apartment opened like a lung taking its first breath in years. The air was cool, untouched, laced with that faint sweetness of forgotten places. Ethan stepped inside, his shadow stretching long against the mirrored walls that seemed to multiply his every movement. Each reflection was perfect, except one. It lagged by a heartbeat, like someone playing catch-up from the other side. The floor creaked behind him, though he hadn't moved. If no one was inside who brushed past the hallway mirror just now, he whispered a greeting to the empty air, half laughing, half checking. The laugh didn't echo back. Instead, the silence returned, a quiet, shuddering breath that wasn't his own. Night pressed against the windows like a held breath. The apartment hummed with electricity and faint static, though every device was off. Ethan sat on the couch, the mirror across the room, watching him like a silent audience. He thought he saw his reflection blink out of rhythm, once, twice, until it stopped entirely. Then the lights flickered and he heard a whisper that carried no direction, only shape. A single word: stay. He stood, heart pounding, but every reflection now looked slightly wrong, smiling, squinting, or facing away. The glass in the kitchen trembled as if something just brushed past from within. Morning arrived, colorless. Sunlight entered the apartment, but nothing felt warm. Ethan noticed that the city outside looked older through the window reflection. Streets cracked, signs rusted, cars gone. Only the reflection of the world was decaying. He leaned closer and saw himself waving from that ruined version of the city. But his own hand in the real world never moved. The glass vibrated, a deep hum rising beneath his skin. Then came the sound of laughter, faint, childlike, from inside the mirror. When he turned, every other mirror in the room had fogged over, except the one holding his double's grin. By evening, the apartment's layout felt unfamiliar. Corners stretched, shadows lengthened faster than the light. Ethan tried to cover one of the mirrors with a sheet, but it slid off by itself when he turned away. In the glass, Mrs. Calloway's reflection appeared, whispering words though her mouth didn't move. Her eyes darted toward the reflection standing behind Ethan. When he spun around, nothing was there. The walls creaked like strained lungs, and in the faint hum of the refrigerator, he swore he heard the same word again. Stay. The mirrors trembled in unison, like they were breathing. That night, sleep came like falling into cold water. He woke gasping, every mirror in the apartment uncovered again. The reflection stood in the nearest one, expression calm, hands pressed flat against the glass. Then the child appeared beside it, staring straight out. Ethan whispered, "What do you want?" The lights flickered once more, and in that single flash, the reflection stepped forward, its palms breaking through the surface without a sound. When darkness fell again, Ethan was gone. Only his reflection remained, staring quietly from every wall. The apartment woke before dawn. Mirrors pulsed faintly with pale light, flickering like distant heartbeats. Ethan's body was gone, but something of him lingered. His reflection now moved freely between the glass surfaces. From the mirror world, he looked out at his former home, watching dust drift through the air, waiting for something that never came. The reflection smiled softly, then turned away from the glass, walking deeper into that reversed version of reality where everything shimmered backward. There were rooms that didn't exist in the real apartment, doors that led to copies of nowhere. Somewhere beyond, a child's laughter echoed, bending around corners that curved in impossible directions. Mrs. Calloway arrived the next morning, her steps hesitant, her gaze flicking across every mirror, as if greeting old ghosts. She had warned the landlord this would happen again. The apartment never kept its tenants. She touched one of the mirrors gently, whispering something under her breath. For a moment, her reflection didn't follow. It stayed still, watching her with quiet, accusing eyes. Behind that frozen double, Ethan's shape shifted, moving closer, as though drawn by her voice. The surface of the glass pulsed once, a faint heartbeat between worlds, and then it went still again. Mrs. Calloway closed her eyes and said softly, "You shouldn't have looked too long." The mirrored apartment grew darker, as if the light were being swallowed whole. Ethan's reflection wandered through rooms that bled into one another, every surface slick and too alive. When he touched a wall, it rippled with slow, liquid motion. In the reflection of the kitchen, the child appeared again, standing beside a warped version of Mrs. Calloway, both smiling with the same wrong expression. A faint radio static filled the air, whispering words that didn't exist. He followed the sound, passing mirror after mirror, until his own reflection began to fade, leaving only the shadows of those watching him. In the real apartment, Mrs. Calloway found one mirror cracked clean down the center. Beneath the glass there was no wood or wall, only a dark, hollow space that breathed faintly warm air. She leaned close, calling Ethan's name as though sound could travel between worlds. A soft thud answered from within. The sound came again, rhythmic, pleading. She reached out, fingertips trembling, and the glass quivered under her touch like living skin. Something pressed back from the other side. For a heartbeat, she saw Ethan's eyes staring through her, desperate, terrified. Before vanishing into darkness, the child stood alone in the mirrored world now, tracing invisible shapes on the glass that separated both sides. Each mark it drew appeared reversed in the real apartment, glowing faintly like thin trails of light. On the other side, Mrs. Calloway watched helplessly as the mirrors began to hum in unison, the sounds swelling until every pane trembled on its hinges. Then, without warning, the light died. All reflections went dark except one, the cracked mirror, where Ethan's hand slowly emerged, dripping with silver liquid, fingers trembling as though remembering what real air felt like. The apartment was silent, but Ethan could hear a pulse through the walls, a faint rhythm that seemed to come from everywhere at once. He stood before a mirror that now reflected both the real apartment and something else, a second room overlapping faintly, like a ghost image. In that other space, he saw himself sitting, calm and expressionless, flipping through a journal. Ethan touched the glass, and the pages in the reflection turned on their own. His handwriting filled them, line after line, though he couldn't remember ever writing them. The words shimmered faintly, and as he leaned closer, one sentence stood out in looping ink. "You moved in because I wanted you to," Mrs. Calloway returned, this time carrying an old photo frame wrapped in cloth. She placed it on the floor, unwrapping it slowly, revealing a black and white picture of the same apartment decades earlier. In the reflection, she saw Ethan standing where another man once stood in the photo. Same stance, same tilt of the head. The resemblance stole her breath. "It repeats," she whispered. "Every mirror remembers." Behind her, Ethan stared at the photo's reflection. His image lingered there, even after he turned away, smiling faintly as if trapped in its silver world. Ethan wandered from mirror to mirror, testing their boundaries, searching for some logic in the reflections that no longer matched. Each glass seemed to show a different version of the same moment. Him laughing, crying, sleeping, sometimes standing where he wasn't. The apartment hummed with quiet static, a sound like distant conversation. The child appeared briefly in one reflection, tracing a circle on the glass with its fingertip. When Ethan copied the motion, faint light spread from his touch, revealing dozens of overlapping handprints beneath the surface. Different sizes, some old, some fading, as though many had reached out before him. Mrs. Calloway confessed she once lived in this apartment too. She spoke slowly, voice trembling with memory. "It doesn't want to be empty," she said. "When you look long enough, it shows you the version that stayed." Ethan listened in silence, unsure if she spoke to him or to his reflection behind the glass. The reflection mimicked neither of them now. It moved on its own, pacing slowly, its expression thoughtful, even sad. When Ethan asked what it wanted, it raised one hand and pointed toward the front door. But the door, in the mirror, opened inward to another apartment entirely. The night returned in a hush. Ethan sat alone, watching his reflection sit opposite him in perfect stillness. They both breathed in rhythm. The reflection reached forward, pressing a hand to the glass, and Ethan did the same. This time there was no delay. Every movement matched perfectly. For the first time, they smiled together. Then, in one breath, Ethan whispered, "Which one of us is real?" The lights flickered, and all the mirrors in the apartment shimmered with faint ripples, as though quietly considering the question. Then the reflection stilled again, offering no answer, just the echo of his own heartbeat in the dark. The days blurred together. Ethan couldn't remember when he had last seen the city outside. The windows still showed light, but it never changed. Each morning felt identical to the last. And yet his reflection seemed to grow older, the faintest gray near its temples. When he turned away, the reflection lingered, watching him with quiet awareness. It began writing something on the inside of the glass, words that only appeared reversed from his side. When he copied them onto paper, they formed a message. "The walls remember everything you dream." Ethan froze, unsure whether it was warning or invitation. Mrs. Calloway came once more, bringing a box of old tenant records. She spread them across the floor, dust rising in lazy spirals. The photos were faded, but each showed someone standing by the same hallway mirror. Different faces, same pose. One face made Ethan's breath catch. It was his. "Decades too early. It keeps choosing," she whispered. "The apartment looks for someone to stay. You moved in because it remembered you." Ethan stared at the photograph, feeling the chill of déjà vu settle deep in his chest. His reflection behind him nodded, slowly, knowingly. The apartment's mirrors no longer stayed still. At night, they flickered like screens catching forgotten moments. Mrs. Calloway as a young woman entering the same door, Ethan unpacking boxes that vanished between blinks, the child sitting in corners that no longer existed. Ethan realized they weren't memories, they were rehearsals. The mirrors were showing what was about to happen. When he whispered, "What are you preparing me for?" the reflection placed its hand against the glass again and mouthed a single phrase he could finally read. "To stay." The soundless word carried weight, like a decision already made. "Oh," Mrs. Calloway told Ethan the truth she had avoided for years. "When I moved out, I didn't leave," she said softly. "I only stopped being the one on this side." Her voice trembled, but her reflection behind her stood calm, smiling faintly. "Every tenant trades places eventually. It's how the apartment keeps its shape." Ethan wanted to argue, but he could feel the glass vibrating behind him, like something waiting for permission. His reflection no longer mirrored him. It breathed on its own. He realized the mirrors weren't barriers. They were doors waiting for both sides to agree. Is inside you all. That night, the apartment felt weightless. Every mirror shimmered like water, their edges glowing faintly blue. Ethan stood between them, reflections multiplying endlessly until they blurred into pure light. The child appeared again, closer now, holding out a hand from inside the nearest pane. Ethan hesitated, sensing not fear but recognition, as if he had known that small figure forever. In the silence that followed, he finally whispered, "Show me." The lights dimmed, the air stilled, and all mirrors cleared at once, revealing one vast room, endless, empty, waiting. His reflection stepped forward first, vanishing into it. Ethan opened his eyes to find the mirrors calm at last. No movement, no flicker, just his own face looking back. The silence felt almost kind. He realized he was standing in a room that looked identical to his apartment, yet lighter, softer, as though built from thought instead of matter. Every reflection showed a different version of him. One reading, one painting, one smiling faintly in peace. He understood then that the mirrors had never been haunted. They were holding all the selves he had been too afraid to remember. This place wasn't a trap. It was memory, alive and waiting to be understood. Mrs. Calloway appeared in the doorway, no longer aged but serene, carrying a single mirror shard in her hand. "It doesn't keep us," she said gently. "It reminds us." She placed the shard on the floor, and it reflected scenes of her past. The day she first arrived, the people she'd lost, the home she had made here. Ethan knelt beside her, watching the images play in silence. For the first time, he noticed the child's reflection standing beside them, eyes bright, smiling softly. "That's you," Mrs. Calloway whispered, the part that never stopped looking back. The reflection returned, not as an echo, but as presence. Calm, centered, familiar. "You built this place every time you forgot who you were," it said. Ethan listened without fear now. "Then why am I here?" he asked quietly. "Because you needed to see yourself from the outside," it replied. They stood across from one another, separated only by a thin veil of glass that no longer distorted their movements. Ethan reached out, and instead of touching cold surface, he felt warmth. The reflection smiled and began to fade, not disappearing, but merging, until there was only one image, steady and whole. The mirrors began to dissolve, edges glowing faintly as they melted into the walls. The apartment returned to its ordinary stillness, but Ethan felt it differently now. Alive, breathing, gentle. He sat on the floor where the first mirror had stood, and the silence carried no weight. Mrs. Calloway watched from the doorway, smiling as if she'd been waiting for this moment. "It's not about staying," she said softly. "It's about remembering enough to move on." The child's laughter echoed one last time, clear and light, before fading into the warmth of morning. When Ethan stepped outside, the air felt new. The city looked the same. Yet every detail seemed sharper, every sound more alive. He turned back once. Through the window, his reflection stood where he had been, watching with quiet acceptance. It raised a hand, not as warning or farewell, but as a gesture of balance. Ethan smiled, finally understanding. The mirrors had never shown strangers. They had shown what he'd lost in himself. He walked away, sunlight breaking across the buildings, carrying with him the calm knowledge that every reflection was simply another way of remembering. The apartment had been empty for months. Dust settled quietly across the wooden floorboards, yet the mirrors stayed spotless, as though polished from within. Mrs. Calloway unlocked the door for the new tenant, her expression soft but distant. Lila stepped inside, smiling at the space as though recognizing it. She ran her hand along the windowsill and caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. But for a brief second, another face shimmered there beside hers, calm, watching. She blinked, and it was gone. "It's beautiful," she said. Mrs. Calloway nodded slowly, answering, "It remembers kindness." In the first week, Lila found herself talking to the apartment out loud. Small murmurs, quiet thanks, half-formed thoughts. She laughed at her own habit until she noticed that her laughter echoed back just a fraction late. Sometimes while reading, she felt as though someone else was turning the pages with her. The mirrors showed faint traces of movement when she walked by, gentle waves of light, never threatening, just aware. One night she whispered, "Do you know me?" And the lights dimmed slightly, as though the apartment were listening. Mrs. Calloway visited one afternoon carrying a small envelope. Inside was a photo of Ethan, smiling in the same spot where Lila now stood. "He loved this place," Mrs. Calloway said, placing the photo on the counter. "He said it helped him see clearly." Lila studied the picture, then looked toward the mirror. Ethan's image lingered there for a moment, faint but smiling as if in memory. "Do they all see something different?" Lila asked. "Not different," Mrs. Calloway replied softly. "Just what's left behind. Outside, Sunlight shifted across the walls like passing time itself. At dusk, the apartment filled with amber light. Lila stood before the largest mirror, her reflection peaceful. Then she saw the child standing behind her, not frightening but curious, gazing up at her like someone who remembered. The moment stretched quietly, like a breath held between times. Lila knelt, whispering, "Are you lost?" The child only smiled, touching the glass gently. When she blinked again, the reflection showed only her own hand there. The silence afterward felt comforting, as though a story had ended softly, rather than broken. Days later, Lila hung a small mirror by the window, her own addition to the space. Every morning it caught the sunlight and scattered it across the walls, brightening corners long left in shadow. Sometimes she thought she saw Ethan's reflection walking past, or Mrs. Calloway's younger face smiling faintly. But she never felt alone. The apartment seemed content again, quiet and complete. One evening, as the last light faded, Lila whispered, "Thank you for remembering me," unsure whom she was speaking to. The mirrors answered only with light, soft, shimmering, alive. Morning light spilled into the apartment, brighter than ever. Lila woke to the faint hum of the city and the soft shimmer of mirrors catching the sun. She walked through each room, noting how the air seemed to breathe with quiet rhythm. In every reflection, she caught fragments of lives. Someone tying a curtain, someone placing flowers, a hand brushing dust from glass. None frightened her. They felt like echoes of kindness left behind. When she whispered a greeting, the reflections brightened for an instant, returning the gesture like a smile remembered from a dream. Mrs. Calloway stopped by with fresh lilies, placing them in a glass jar on the windowsill. "You've made it brighter," she said. Lila smiled. "It was already here. I just opened the curtains." For the first time, Mrs. Calloway looked into the main mirror without fear. She saw her reflection standing straight, eyes young again, lips curved in quiet relief. "Then it's ready," she murmured, unsure whether she meant the room or herself. The child's reflection appeared beside her, holding one of the lilies, and the moment shimmered softly, like memory forgiving itself. That evening, Lila found Ethan's old journal tucked behind a panel near the hallway mirror. Most pages were blank, but one line glimmered faintly in graphite. "If someone reads this, remember that the light always learns your name." She read it twice, then looked up at the mirror, where Ethan's face appeared just long enough to nod. It wasn't haunting, it was recognition. She placed the journal on the shelf, opened to that page, and whispered, "I'll keep it alive." Outside, the first stars reflected in the window, turning the glass into a quiet constellation. As night deepened, the mirrors grew still again, their light resting instead of reaching. Lila stood in the doorway, listening to the hush that comes when a place is finally at peace. Mrs. Calloway had gone home hours earlier. The scent of lilies lingered. In the largest mirror, the child appeared one last time, waving gently before fading into the calm surface. Lila smiled, whispering goodnight. The glass caught her reflection and held it tenderly, like a memory deciding to stay a while longer before drifting into rest. Days later, new sunlight entered through clean windows, scattering across the mirrors in fine golden ribbons. Lila left the door ajar as she stepped out to work, the same way Ethan once had. The apartment breathed softly, alive but quiet, every reflection poised between past and present. For a moment, all the mirrored figures, Ethan, Mrs. Calloway, the child, appeared together, peaceful, watching her go. Then the light shifted, and only Lila's reflection remained. Outside, the city shimmered as though every window carried a piece of that calm within it.